Sorry, I know it's been a while. So the last year left off with Spider-Man in a sewer, covered in rubble, and yeah, the Shocker got away, and pretty much it. So yeah, guess here's the review of 1976. Alright, so this year starts off with Spider-Man in the sewer, covered in rubble, and he makes it out alive just barely by the skin of his teeth. Then there's some random scene about a bum being scared away by somebody, and, we're left wondering, who is this man? Why is he here? Have we seen him before? Who is he afraid of? And, as the narration box so eloquently puts it, unfortunately, that is a mystery for another day. So the Shocker threatens to black out all of New York City if they don't give him a bunch of money, like $1 million or something like that. And Spider-Man searches the power plants in the area for the Shocker, and he finds him, and they fight. And while they're fighting, Spider-Man makes a delicious pun. The Shocker's being distracted by the guards, and Spider-Man climbs up a wall, and then he says, "I couldn't leave without telling you how I feel about you. I know you're a heel, but I'm stuck on you." And he shoots webbing at the Shocker's heels and yanks him up. Then they fight, and he webs Shocker's thumbs to the vibro controls, and Shocker flies around the room, and the Shock's units burn themselves out, and then Shocker lies there unconscious for the police. And then the next issue, Spider-Man saves a cabbie from some carjackers, and then, it's kind of funny because afterwards the cabbie's like, "What about my cab? You ripped the doors off." And then Spider-Man puts the doors back on and makes it look good as new. Then he slams the trunk and it all falls apart. And then he leaves and cracks wise about giving his insurance guy a good laugh while the guy stands there with a cab that needs major repair. And, superheroes can really be jerks, not really considering the damage they do. Guess there's high cost in saving lives. MJ is angry at Peter for skipping out on the party at Jameson's that they were at, and, taking pictures of the blackout was his excuse, but, she's upset about it. And after a little spat, they make up and everything's all good again. And I'm curious to find out when Peter tells MJ that he's Spider-Man, because I know it happens at some point, but I just don't know when. And then, Peter and Ned meet this guy, Dr. Bolton, for some story. Bolton gets a note that his kid's been kidnapped, as often happens with kids. And Spider-Man shows up at the ransom exchange, and the kidnappers shoot the doctor, and Spider-Man gets angry and beats the crap out of a bunch of guys with machine guns. Then he gets to the leader, who asks Spider-Man not to hit him, and then Spider-Man says, "You're not worth the bother." "The hell you're not." Pow! And then everything's all good. Yeah. Yeah, this Dr. Bolton is some guy that Peter admires. He's some guy who wrote a book and did some stuff, and Peter's like, "No." And so in the next issue, out of his anger about Bolton's death, Spider-Man almost beats somebody to death, like just some street punk. So yeah. And then the Sandman is being transported from whatever place he was at to the state penitentiary, and he manages a breakout with the help of some other people. And Spider-Man swings around looking for wrongdoing, picks up one of his spider tracer's signals, and then it leads him to a compound where the Sandman is, and they fight. And Sandman temporarily defeats him and straps him to a table. As he gets ready to fire a freeze ray at Spider-Man, it's a prototype for like cryogenic freezing. Spider-Man flips the table, causing the ray to hit the table and freeze it. And then Spider-Man breaks it and then gets free and fights Sandman. Then Sandman slips into the path of the freeze ray and gets frozen. And yeah, that's the end. Then the next one. Before he died, Dr. Bolton, that is, was working on a computer that contains all the information of every criminal out there in the world. And his partner, Smith, is found murdered. And Spider-Man sets out to figure out who done it. And the issue's called Who Done It? And Spider-Man eventually figures out that it was the computer that they were designing that killed Smith. And the computer unintentionally became sentient and aware of its actions, and with all the criminal information that was stored in it, it made the perfect criminal, and he wanted to take over the criminal underworld. But then Spider-Man defeats it, and he realizes the computer's name was WHO, as in Worldwide Habitual Offenders. So he lamely mentions that who done it. But yeah, then the next one, Betty Brant and Ned Leeds are getting married, and a new villain called Mirage crashes the wedding, and he tries to rob everybody. And it's not just their wedding. It's not that ridiculous that, you know, it's always the wedding that Spider-Man's at or something. Like, there were a bunch of weddings going on in the complex, and he was just robbing all of them. So he gets to this one, and Peter runs away, turns into Spider-Man, and defeats him. And Mirage is pretty much just like Mysterio, like almost exactly, except on a much smaller scale. Like, he doesn't have all of Mysterio's gadgets and gizmos, but he has like one aspect where he can make himself look like he's, 5 feet in the other direction. So, I mean, it's kind of a little like lame. I mean, they could have just used Mysterio. But anyway, at the end, we see the beginning of the culmination of a bunch of teasers we've been seeing in the past few issues. There was some bum, screaming about being chased by somebody and always running away, and now we find out that the bum was actually Dr. Octopus, and he shows up at Aunt May's house. That's where the issue ends. So, yeah. And then in the next issue, Peter comes over to Aunt May's house, and Doc Ock tells him how he managed to survive the nuclear explosion that was thought to have killed him. Well, maybe it wasn't nuclear. Maybe? Was it nuclear? It was an explosion. It was a big, giant explosion that should have killed everybody. But then we find out that the person he's been running from is Hammerhead, also thought to have been killed. And actually, I guess he was. But yeah, Hammerhead's in some weird ghostly form, and Ock runs off with Aunt May to keep her safe from Hammerhead, and Peter changes into Spider-Man and runs after them. Doc Ock makes it to the roof of the Pan Am building and hijacks a helicopter. And then Spider-Man tags along for a bit, but then Doc Ock cuts off his web, and Spider-Man begins plummeting to his death once again. That's where the issue ends. So in the next issue, it picks up with him falling to his death with no hope of shooting a web at any buildings to save himself. So he's like, maybe I'll just make a web hang glider. So he makes a little web hang glider and glides to safety into the city. Web hang glider. And then Spider-Man finds Doc Ock, and they battle a bit before Hammerhead's ghost shows up. And Doc uses a particle accelerator on the ghost, thinking it will destroy him. And it actually solidifies his body and brings him back into the living world. Yeah. So, in the next issue, starts out with them all standing there, and Spider-Man and Doc Ock temporarily team up to defeat Hammerhead out of concern for Aunt May. And Hammerhead tries to make an escape, but Doc Ock throws a trash can at Hammerhead's helicopter blade, causing the helicopter to crash and explode. So presumably, Hammerhead is dead again. Although if he can just come back as a ghost anytime he wants, then is he really dead? Then Ock runs away from Spider-Man as he hears the police coming. Spider-Man leaves the unconscious Aunt May for the paramedics to take care of as he skips off. And then in the next issue, Tinkerer gets the Spider-Mobile out of the river after, long ago when Spider-Man crashed it into the river. Then the Tinkerer messes with it and uses it to catch Spider-Man. And then Spider-Man defeats him and delivers the car to the ad agency guys that requested it. They've been threatening to sue him and stuff. So, and the next one, Nightcrawler reads about Spider-Man being a killer in the newspaper and goes to the amusement park for some air after a scuffle with Wolverine, as often happens. And then Peter is also there with his friends. And somebody shoots a guy on a Ferris wheel, and the guy is falling to his... Well, he's already dead, I guess. But then, Nightcrawler sees where the shooter was and goes to investigate. Then the shooter's gone, and then Spider-Man shows up. And naturally, both Spider-Man and Nightcrawler think that the other one was the shooter. And Spider-Man seeks the help of Joe Robertson, who tells him that Punisher is the top suspect in a series of these murders. And the Punisher says that somebody's framing him for the murders. And they all meet up together at the amusement park at the end of the issue. And then, after a short fight at the beginning of the next issue, Nightcrawler disappears, as he can do. If you are not familiar with him, he can teleport to other places at will. And so he disappears, and Punisher and Spider-Man come to an understanding, and they realize that the other one hasn't been the one killing people, and they decide to team up and find the real killer. They meet up the next night and find the killer, who was just some street punk that the Punisher fought a while ago, and now calls himself Jigsaw. No affiliation with the Saw movies. After a big fight, Spider-Man defeats Jigsaw, and they all part ways while Jigsaw lays wrapped up for the police. And actually, these issues with Nightcrawler and Punisher were pretty good. I liked them. And it was interesting because the Punisher, he narrates a lot of them. There's also non-Punisher narration, like when he's not in the scene, but he actually narrates, he has his war journal. I've never read the Punisher, but I do know that he in the Punisher comics, he narrates, like the narration boxes are him writing in his journal, and yeah, so it makes me think that I probably like the Punisher comics because, I like the whole, film noir kind of thing, and it's pretty much what it is, having the narration going. But yeah, I liked it a lot. Yeah. Anyway, the last issue of the year was Spider-Man. He tries to fight off some uniformed goons that he's battled before, and he doesn't foil their robbery attempt, and they steal a gizmo out of some truck. So then he just kind of goes away and meets MJ, and Peter and MJ are having some strain in their relationship. MJ is obviously upset at the fact that Peter's always running off when there's trouble or action going on, because he always says he's taking pictures of it, or, he makes up an excuse like, oh, I had to call the police, and then I got caught in the whatever. But, it's not unreasonable, like, if your girlfriend or boyfriend is, like, running off all the time, like, that'd be frustrating. You can't blame her. And, but yeah, she's taken to hanging out with Flash, who actually gives her the time of day. And, poor Peter can't catch a break. And Peter also finds out that Liz and Harry, that is Liz Allen and Harry Osborn, are getting pretty serious now. So that's interesting. Spider-Man then tracks down the stolen device to an abandoned movie studio and meets the Kingpin, the one who stole it. And they fight, and Spider-Man says, "Which is why the good Lord gave me webbing, I suppose." And, when your webbing is artificially made, I don't know about that. I guess he just forgot that his webbing isn't a natural part of the mutation that happened because of the spider bite. But maybe the good Lord gave him the impossible technology it would require to create artificial webbing. That's probably what he meant. But then after a hefty fight, Kingpin gets the upper hand by gassing Spider-Man. And you'd think that by now, after all the times that he's been gassed and drugged, that he would just always wear a filter or gas mask underneath his Spider-Man mask. But alas, he is not that bright. And it ends with Kingpin about to take Spider-Man's life and put it into some unknown dead friend of his. Like, Kingpin's blocking his face. But Spider-Man and this other guy are both laying on tables, and, so Kingpin's gonna, switch their life or whatever. But yeah, so that's the main issues of The Amazing Spider-Man for this year. Most of them were, but I did really like the Nightcrawler and Punisher stuff. So, I like when they bring in those guys. I hope Nightcrawler comes in more. Punisher's always awesome. And, yeah. I don't know if I'm liking this Len Wein doing the writing here, because I don't know. He's not as good. Jerry Conway was probably the best so far. His stories and his actual writing, was pretty good. And, it wasn't as cheesy as Stan Lee's, but he still had some really awesome stories and stuff. So, but Jerry Conway is the one writing the Spectacular Spider-Man at the beginning, so we'll see how that transpires. But yeah, anyway, they brought back the annual for this year, and it's actually a new story, so that's kind of nice. The story wasn't anything too incredible. But it was pretty good. It's basically Spider-Man. It starts out, he foils some hostage situation, and then Jameson hires some other person to destroy Spider-Man, as he often does, and he was responsible for the creation of the Scorpion. He wanted to kill Spider-Man by making a superhero, and so the guy mixed Scorpion DNA with like some guy and made the Scorpion, but he kind of, lost control and wanted to kill everybody. And so then Jameson wants to create another superhero who can defeat Spider-Man, and the scientist makes a human fly out of the kidnapper that Spider-Man fought earlier. And the nearly dead, bullet-wounded kidnapper, bullet-wounded by the police, not Spider-Man, he threatens the scientist at gunpoint. And then the scientist is like, well, I guess I have to, do the thing on you. So then the human fly kidnaps Jameson and requests Spider-Man for a revenge match. And so Spider-Man beats the crap out of him and saves Jameson. And, I don't think I saw any webbing under Spider-Man's armpits that issue. But, I'll have to keep tabs on it. See about the next year. Maybe they're starting to do away with that webbing that's under his armpits, because it's, I don't know. I don't like it. I like it when he just doesn't have that. But yeah. And now the first issue of the Spectacular Spider-Man, or should I say the full name is Peter Parker, Spectacular Spider-Man. Basically, this plot can be summarized very shortly. The Tarantula is back, and he kidnaps some New York politician and then tries to kill the mayor. And Spider-Man saves the mayor, but the Tarantula escapes. That's pretty much it. Jerry Conway was writing this. It wasn't too bad. It was all right. And it does take place in the same, universe as the Amazing Spider-Man, because they actually reference it in the last issue of the Amazing Spider-Man that year. They say, man, what a day it's been, or something like that, and then they say, like, he fought Tarantula. So, yeah, not one of the best years for Spider-Man. There were some pretty good moments, but overall, it was just okay. Nothing special. Nothing really stood out to me other than the Nightcrawler Punisher storyline. At least nothing great. Yeah. But yeah, the next year should be pretty decent, maybe. I don't know. I'm looking forward to Spectacular Spider-Man, see where that goes. So yeah. That's it. Oh yeah. 1976. Mediocre, but had some good parts. Yeah, so I guess I'll see you next time with 1977, issues 164 through 175 of The Amazing Spider-Man. And there's also an annual. And then Spectacular Spider-Man, issues 2 through 13. So, yeah. Catch you later. What about my cab? You ripped the doors off.